just celebrated Talking Live. There's something sacred about this stadium and its setting. There's nothing like this venue, in my opinion, in all of sports.
The setting is about as good as anywhere in the country. With the San Gabriel Mountains in the backdrop, it's always picturesque.
We're going to play football. Yes, he's going for the corner. He's got it. Vince Young scores.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back and welcome to episode 2 of Rose Bowl Live. I'm your host from the Rose Bowl Stadium, Dedan Brozino, and on behalf of the entire stadium team and our CEO, Dedan, we hope you remain safe, happy, and healthy as we continue to keep a close eye on the virus. As we head into National Nurses Week, we send our gratitude to all the nurses as well as the healthcare employees and frontline workers that are working hard to get us back to normal. Thank you very much. For those of you that are new to Rose Bowl Live and for those of you that are back for a second straight week, we truly appreciate you finding us on the web. Last week, our new format was viewed by thousands around the country as Dan Fouts and Tim Brandt spent time reliving their time in the broadcast booth. We have 2 more key members of our Rose Bowl family with us this afternoon who are ready to take us onto the sidelines and discuss some iconic moments from their careers. Let's get started with Coach Dick Vermeil. Dick was incredible on the sidelines in Westwood, as we all know. After leading UCLA to a Rose Bowl victory over number 1 ranked Ohio State and Coach Woody Hayes, UCLA got put back on the national forefront. To this day, that game in 1976 is still one of the biggest upsets in Rose Bowl game history. After UCLA, Vermeil took over a struggling Eagles franchise in 1976 and turned them into a playoff team by 1978. 2 years later, he guided the Eagles to their first ever NFC title and a Super Bowl berth. Vermeil returned to the sidelines in 97, taking over a Rams team that was among the worst in football during that decade. After 2 losing seasons, Vermeil and the Rams turned it around and went on a magic carpet ride in 1999 as the Rams transformed into what we know as fans as the greatest show on turf, behind quarterback Kurt Warner, running back Marshall Faulk, receivers Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt. The 99 Rams won 13 regular season games that year before defeating the Titans in Super Bowl. And that was one of the most memorable Super Bowls in recent memory. It was literally down to the final couple of yards, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. Vermeil came back to coaching later and embarked on his 3rd and final coaching stop in Kansas City in 2001. And for a 3rd time, Vermeil transformed a struggling team into a winner, leading the Chiefs to a 13-3 regular season in 2003. Coach Vermeil has won Coach of the Year awards at 4 different stops. He's a true leader. He's turned around organizations and franchises everywhere he's gone. Coach Vermeil, welcome to Rose Bowl Live. How are you and your family doing? Where are you guys at? We appreciate you being here.
We're doing fine. We're in Chester County, Pennsylvania. We're 45 miles out of Philadelphia. We have a large piece of ground, and we're sort of hibernating out here, easy to isolate out here in the country. So we're safe and sound, and I don't know a single person that has the virus back here in our area.
It's great, Coach. Glad that you and Carol are doing well. We appreciate you being with us today, and we're going to have some fun with you and John here in a second. So thanks for clicking in.
Nice to be with you, especially with Mr. Sciarra there.
All right, our second guest is John Sciarra. He continues the fabled tradition of UCLA quarterbacks, a great quarterback school out here in Westwood, as he enjoyed an All-American career on and off the field. He's one of 13 Bruins to enter the College Football Hall of Fame, as Cade McNown joins the class this year in 2020. John was a consensus first-team All-American in 1975 and finished 7th in the Heisman Trophy voting. He was named Rose Bowl MVP after leading the Bruins to that upset over number 1 ranked and undefeated Ohio State in the 76 Rose Bowl game. We'll talk a little bit about that coming up. John was a first-team All-Conference selection in his senior year, and he led UCLA to a 32-10-3 record, including the 1975 Pac-10 title. A team captain and 2-time team MVP, he led UCLA in scoring in 1975, and he also led the Bruins in punt return yardage in 72 and 73, a not very well-known fact, so that's pretty cool stuff. John holds the school record for rushing yards by a quarterback and still ranks in the top 10 in career total offense. He excelled off the field and in the classroom as well, earning recognition as a National Football Foundation National Scholar Athlete and a first-team academic All-American in 1975. Taken in the 4th round of the 76 NFL draft by the Bears, Sciarra opted to sign with the BC Lions in the CFL, earning Rookie of the Year honors in the Canadian Football League. The LA native went on to play 6 years for the Eagles and appeared in Super Bowl 15 with Coach Vermeil, and we'll get to that in a little bit. John, welcome to Rose Bowl Live. Thank you for being with us. How are you and Michelle and the family doing?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here. And of course, with Coach Vermeil, it's very exciting, and we stay in touch, so it's good to see him. We're faring well. It's just crazy times, and everybody's kind of in the same boat. It's Groundhog's Day. It's what it is every day. You lock into certain routines, but we're doing fine, and thank God that the family's healthy and doing well.
Well, thank you guys again from the bottom of our hearts, from the whole Rose Bowl Stadium family for being here. And John, I want to start with you. You grew up near the Rose Bowl Stadium, near Pasadena, went to Bishop Amat before coming to UCLA. Talk about growing up close to the Rose Bowl and then your recruitment into Westwood. What was it like to go to UCLA and then ultimately end your career at the Rose Bowl right in your own backyard?
Yeah, no, I grew up in Alhambra, and then went to high school, actually to Mission High School in San Gabriel, and the Archdiocese actually closed that school, and I transferred out to Bishop Amat. And it was a wonderful school. Actually, I'm on the board there, and I continue to be involved with Bishop Amat. Pat Hayden, John McKay were classmates. Well, actually, they were 1 year ahead, teammates at Bishop Amat. And, we were state champions 2 years in a row, and it was exciting. And then, of course, to be recruited by UCLA and by Coach Terry Donahue. He was a second-year assistant coach at that time under Pepper Rogers. And, it was just a wonderful experience. I met my wife, Michelle, there. And, of course, Coach Vermeil, one of my mentors, coached us in the Super Bowl. Just an overall wonderful experience. I had great teammates. It was a dream come true as I reflect back, and I still stay in touch with a number of those guys. And as well as Coach Vermeil and Coach Donahue. It's just really exciting. Of course, to play in the Rose Bowl, I had never played in the Rose Bowl. A lot of high school teams would play there. And, of course, watching the Rose Bowl game every January 1st was something I looked forward to. I went to the parade. So the very first time I played in the Rose Bowl was January 1 of 1976. And so it was exciting to be there, obviously.
Thanks, John. Coach, let's talk about that game on January 1st, 1976 there for a little bit. The 76 Rose Bowl game, still to this day, I mean, there's been so many magnetic, iconic moments with New Year's Day in Pasadena, but that 76 game is still one of the biggest upsets in our history. I think UCLA was 15.5-point dogs that day or somewhere around there. What was it like to coach in that game, coach in that stadium for such a big win, and where does that rank in such an illustrious career like you've had?
Well, first off, we had played Ohio State earlier in the year, and they beat us 41-20. In fact, they shut us down. We scored early in the game, and then they scored the 6 next time they had the ball. John had 14 carries for 0 yards. They shut us down. Shut us down. But in so doing, they helped us motivate our football team to mature and get better by the time we played them in the Rose Bowl. To me, it wasn't an upset. I mean, they were the best team in the country, no question about it. But by that time, we felt we had improved in our scheme with difficult Ohio State, and we'd had improved our scheme offensively and defensively and everything else. And they scored 3 points. They scored 6 times in a row, and the first time we played them that year. So a lot of things improved due to my great coaching staff, the Donahues, the Stiles, the Billy Matthews, the Jerry Long, Dick Tomey, these guys, wonderful football coaches. And it was a big thrill to get there. I still think about it often. I rank that right along with my 2 Super Bowl games I've been in, had won one, lost one, and other big games. At that time of your career when you're young and just learning how to coach, and you get in that format and then you win it, it's a lifetime experience that can never be duplicated. It just can't be, especially like John said, with the people. I stay in touch with a lot of kids that are on that team. I hear from them. Of course, I stay in touch with John. He played for me 5 or 6 years here. They brought him back, and heck, he led the NFC in punt returns 1 year for us. So played in the secondary. So it's a great, great, great memory. One you can't duplicate.
Yeah. For those of you viewing online on Facebook and on YouTube, we appreciate you listening and tuning in today. If you have any comments or questions for Coach or John, please comment on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll get to those a little bit later in today's program. We appreciate it. John, sticking with that Rose Bowl game in 1976, Coach just referenced it was the second time you all were playing Ohio State that season. You changed some schemes, obviously changed some things around, like he said. Take us under the helmet and onto campus as a student for a little bit. You know, what were those weeks of preparation like leading up to that game? I mean, there's a fairly significant break for a student athlete in between a bowl game and a regular season finale. I mean, what was that like being on campus, training with the coaching staff and your teammates? I mean, walk us through that.
Well, you know, it was I think Coach alluded to in the opening that it was the first time that the UCLA had actually gone to the Rose Bowl or been to the Rose Bowl in 10 years. So they were, 66 was with the Beban era. And then so 10 years later, there we were again. But, you know, we had just beat USC to win the Pac-8 title at the time. And a lot of the players were thinking, you know, hey, we're going to do the Beef Bowl and we're going to Disneyland. It was all great. And I've told this story maybe 100 times if I told it once. And people who know Coach Vermeil and players who've played for Coach, not only do they love him, but they know and respect him for his work ethic. And it got to the point, though, where I think Coach was just not going to accept losing. So he got us back into double days. And that was a very challenging thing for the players, because here we're thinking we're doing Disneyland and the Beef Bowl and, you know, standard practices. And all of a sudden we're back. Not that we didn't go to the Beef Bowl or Disneyland, we did, but we were working pretty hard, going 2-a-days. And so the players said, you know, maybe we need to talk with Coach and see what he says about loosening up. And so we had this committee that Coach actually formed, made up of a couple seniors and juniors and one sophomore and a freshman. And so we went up to talk to Coach about, you know, maybe easing up on the practices. And about 15 minutes before we were supposed to be on the field, here we go walking in. And Coach looked up and he was totally shocked to see us in his office or up in the coach's offices. So what are you guys doing here? You're supposed to be on the field in 15 minutes. And I said, Coach, you know, the team wants us to talk to you about practice. And he says, okay, come into my office. So we get chairs and we go into his office, and Randy Cross and myself and Del Curry and I think Wally Henry and a number of others. And there was about 9 of us. And Coach says, okay, what's this all about, John? I said, well, you know, the players think that we're working a little too hard. He says, what do you think? I said, look at Coach, I'm kind of this committee. I'm just delivering the message here, you know. And so he turns to Randy Cross. He says, well, Randy, what do you think? He says, well, Coach, I think you need to maybe lighten up a little bit. We're working too hard. And he says, well, what about you? Well, I agree. I think we're working a little too hard. So he pauses for a second, and he's standing up behind his desk, and he pauses, and the next thing you know, his fist goes on his desk, and he says, well, pounds his desk. I'll tell you what I think. I think you better get your butts out of my office, and you better get down there and tell your teammates they better be on the field on time, or I'm going to walk up the Bruin Walk, and I'm going to recruit students that take pride in the institution, and they don't want to be embarrassed on national television. And those are the kids I'm looking for. So get out of here. So we went down there to go in the locker room. They were dancing to the jukebox. They think we did well. We didn't. I said, the man's very upset. You better get dressed. And right after I said that, here come the coaching staff. And next thing you know, we're back on the field and we're working hard. And we end up upsetting the number 1 team in the country that Rose Bowl. And so I guarantee if you ask any team or any player on that team, if they would do it all over again with the same hard work. Yeah. So it's an interesting story. But the one other thing about that game that Coach we were talking about they beat us soundly in the first game, and they did. I think it was 42-20 or something like that. But you know, Coach deserves an incredible amount of credit. And the reason why I say that is because that game at halftime, Ohio State was winning 3-0. And we went in thinking that we would be able to run the option on them and move the ball. And they had already thought we were going to be doing that. They were playing with an 8-man front. And we get into the locker room, and we were struggling running the ball because of that 8-man front. And coach says, okay, we're going to scrap the game plan for now. We're going to go out and we're going to open it up, the passing game. They got man up. We're just going to start throwing the ball. And all of a sudden, we started throwing the ball, completing passes. We score a touchdown, and all of a sudden, they started moving out of that 8-man front because we were getting real. And then we went back to the game plan, and we started running the ball again. So we really, I attribute that whole win to coach. And of course, it was an incredible team effort. Our defense played out of their minds, and so, but to be able to make adjustments like that at halftime that are meaningful adjustments is, I think, quite remarkable. And coach deserves a lot of credit for that.
Well, John, who really did a great job, too, in the running game. Remember, they shut us down in the first half. But Terry Donahue changed a little of the blocking scheme on our outside veer. And they were forcing you to keep the ball and tackling you before we could get it pitched or anything. And then we made a little scheme change, and it opened up. Eddie Ayers running inside. Then all of a sudden it loosened up inside. Wendell Tyler breaks a couple inside. But Terry and the offensive coaches did a real good job of making that adjustment. And then you threw the ball lights out that second half, 2 touchdowns to Wally Henry. They were playing man, so we went to the slants out of 3 wide receivers, which they really hadn't seen us do much of. And
Right.
You hit him on a 67-yarder and a 17-yarder for touchdowns in that ball game. But the big thing is the defense.
Yeah, they played phenomenal.
Lynn Stiles and staff, Dick Tomey and those guys, that they did a great job. Bill McPherson, God bless him, which just passed away, did a great job of changing how we play. Plus, we were a better football team by the end of the year. That same football team only lost 1 game the next year. It was a good football team.
That's right.
Eric DiPaolo and all those kids. And I counted up, we had 9 of them, or 9 or 10 of those guys that later ended up playing in the NFL, including you, one time or another. So they were good football players, but they were young. And it took time and hard work to mature to be able to beat a team. Now, I don't think we could beat them 3 out of 5 times, but we might beat them 2 out of 5 times if we had to play them again.
Come on, coach.
One was really good.
Coach, in relation to that 76 game, you faced another iconic coach that year, Woody Hayes, twice. I mean, what kind of mutual respect did you have for Coach Hayes out there at Ohio State? Did you guys have a relationship? How was that?
Well, I got to know him during that period of time, just coaching against him a couple of times, and then I had 2 of his assistant coaches were coaching for me that I'd hired off his staff. Chuck Clausen coach. I hired him right off his staff when I went to the Eagles. I hired those kind of guys. So, not at UCLA, but at the Eagles. So I had respect for what they did and how they did it. And Woody Hayes was an icon, a legendary coach. And I was even nervous shaking his hand. But during the week, you're around him a few times socially. You get to feel comfortable in talking with him. But, he was just a great football coach and a great leader, great man, great integrity. Hardworking, tough-minded guy, old-fashioned football coach, and he had a lot of great football players, 2-time Heisman Trophy winner on there. But, hey, their quarterback hurt us as much as anybody in the first game. Cornelius did. He did a lot of yards running on us. But the big thing is our football team matured and got better. And I can remember, in fact, I have right here, you can see it's handwritten. I saved them. I spent about a few hours preparing myself mentally how we were going to approach this whole ball game for the next, 3 weeks of preparation. And I started out the whole thing trying to make my football team realize that we hadn't played our best game yet, and it was going to be so exciting to do it all together on the same day. And that's the only way we were going to beat this football team. I can actually remember taking my best players and standing them up and say, "Hey, Randy Cross, have you played the best game you've ever played yet?" No. Every one of them would say no. I says, "Well, guys, guess what? That's what's going to take to beat the Rose Bowl champions, Ohio State." And that's what they did. Collectively, they played the best football they could physically play. And that's how we beat them. Yeah.
I want to shift now over to the NFL. You guys both had some incredible time in the NFL. with Super Bowl experience. And Coach, I want to start with you because you had some really incredible experiences flipping around 3 franchises the way you did, and just motivating those teams and those professionals like you just referenced to those student athletes at UCLA. In particular, you coached the St. Louis Rams to the franchise's only Super Bowl victory. Talk through some of your favorite memories of that season and hoisting that Lombardi trophy, because 2-3 seasons earlier, the Rams were the doormat when you walked into town. I mean, how did that feel to finally hold that trophy, and what do you recall from that the most?
Well, when I think of that team, I think of the first 2 years before the team won it in the third year. I think of what those guys went through. We only had 9 guys off the original roster that lined up 3 years later and played in the Super Bowl. Okay, 9 guys off everybody under contract. We had 9 of them left, but they could play. I'll tell you that. And they knew what work was, and they knew camaraderie. They cared about each other, and we had skill. We drafted extremely well. My personnel department, Charlie Army and John Becker and the staff and my coaches and hopefully myself, we drafted very well. When it's all said and done, in a year from now, there'll be 5 guys off the offensive side of that line of scrimmage in the NFL Hall of Fame. Okay, Orlando Pace is already there. Marshall Faulk's already there. Isaac Bruce goes in this year. Torrey Holt will go in another one. Another year, he's been in the finals. We had 5 guys. So, and I brought in Mike Martz, ran the offense my third year there, and he did a great job with my offensive coaches. And it was a great, one of the all-time great football teams. One of the all-time great. Robert Montgomery was my running back coach, and he played with John and Carl Harrison was my defensive line coach. He played with John at the Eagles, but it was a big thrill. It was a big thrill. I don't know if I can say it's that much bigger than winning the Rose Bowl. Everything is relative to the time in your career. I can remember winning the Thanksgiving Day high school championship game thinking that was my Super Bowl. Then you win the Rose Bowl. That's the biggest game there is. Then you win a Super Bowl. It all fits into that time in your life. And at that time, it's an unbelievable experience. But it's all about the good people I surrounded myself with.
And Coach, you're beloved everywhere you stop, and one of those stops you're beloved is Kansas City. And I want to weave in a question here before we get over to John about his time with the Eagles. But how did that make you feel emotionally when Kansas City busted through for their first title in 50 years this past season as a former coach, and how well you're liked out there in the Midwest?
Well, I was really excited about it, more so than maybe somebody else, because Carl Peterson, who was with me at UCLA and the Eagles, brought me to the Chiefs. He was the president there for 20 years, and they never won the world championship there, and I failed in 5 years of winning it for Lamar Hunt. And I was so excited that Carl could say the Chiefs won it, even though he wasn't there, but more so even that Lamar Hunt's family. Lamar was gone, great man, fine person to work for, wonderful family, and they win it. And I know the community, and then it's Andy Reid, who's a personal friend, did a great job of coaching. And it just you feel a little part of it, because you left 5 years of your career there intact, and it was all positive experiences there. I still go back from time to time. I was there for the banquets this year, postseason. No, it was Kansas City's a wonderful city. It's a great football city. They're every bit as passionate as Philadelphia fans, not quite as intense. Okay, John knows what I mean. But when you lose a game in Kansas City, they say, "Oh, that's too bad, coach. You'll win next week." They don't say that to you many times in Philadelphia. But it was a wonderful experience, and I felt a little part of it. And plus, I had communicated with the ownership in regard to the hiring of Andy Reid as well, so I felt a little part of it.
That's great, Coach. Thanks for sharing that with us. We appreciate that. Shifting to Philly, and I'm assuming you didn't get snowballs thrown at you, Coach or John, like Santa Claus did that year. But one of the most iconic plays that gets replays every season that you both were on the sidelines watching in person was the miracle at the Meadowlands. It ultimately helped you punch a playoff ticket that year and put the franchise on this trajectory that put you on path for the Super Bowl a few seasons later. John, I want to start with you. I mean, what did you think watching that play in person? Did you guys think there was any way in hell that you were going to win that game at that moment? Walk us through that moment in time, and then, Coach, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the same question.
Well, I have to laugh because I'm usually on the other side of that play. I'm usually the one. I'm on the team that happens to. But what was amazing is, and I remember standing not too far from Coach, and I mean, it's called the miracle at the Meadowlands because the game is essentially over. I mean, even if we were to get the ball back, we couldn't kick a field goal. There was only, I think, 17 seconds left in the game, and they were winning by 4, and they had the ball. And, they had plenty of room between, the line of scrimmage and our goal line. So, all they have to do is take a knee. The game's over. No time. We had no timeouts. There was nothing. I mean, and so it really was a miracle. There were some communication issues. I know Joe Pisarcik because he later ended up playing for the Eagles. And so, and we had some good times in the locker room too. But he actually had said that, he was trying to, but he had strict instructions to hand the ball off. But when the play happened, it was like, am I really seeing this? Is this really happening? And then watching Herm, kind of just run in the end zone with a little bit of an escort. He was leading the pack, but nobody was going to catch him. And I remember just kind of like going, what just happened? And I look over and I see Coach Vermeil, and he's got his clipboard, and he's got both hands on his clipboard, and the clipboard he's got on his head. And he's kind of like going, and he had it up there for about a minute or so, and then he took it down, and it was just, I mean, it was crazy, absolutely crazy. And then, as you pointed out earlier, ended up that one win, not that one, but we needed 9 wins to get to the playoffs, and that was the first time that the Eagles that year with that win counted as one of the wins we needed. I think it was the first time that the Eagles had made the playoffs, and I don't know how many years, Coach. It was
18 years, something like 18 years. It was a long time. Anyway, yeah, Johnny, I remember it. I'm probably asked about that single play more than any play as a football coach in my career at any level. It's amazing. And every year here in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, when the Giants play the second game against the Eagles, they always bring up that play and it goes, oh, I'm amazed that people even want to hear about it back here. I'm sort of tired of talking about it. I was amazed. I was shocked. I actually, when it was all said and done, I felt sorry for the other coaching staff. Okay. I felt sorry for those guys. Can you believe losing a game with that situation? Your head, like John said, it's a lock. It's over. And here you come. But my defensive coaches hadn't quit. And my defensive team hadn't quit. Here comes Herman Edwards off the right corner. The ball's flopping there, and he picks it up. They're in a tight formation. So the corner's only a couple yards off the line of scrimmage, 2 yards outside the tight end. He picks it up and runs it in. You don't realize what's happening until all of a sudden it's over and you say, oh my God, it did happen. And that was also the time, the one game that Leonard Toews, the owner of the Eagles, could not be at. He was in Houston having a heart valve put in. When they started doing that, DeBecke was the name of the surgeon. They put it, and he had to go to Houston to have it done. So I got to talk to him after the game. I said, I hope that heart valve is still working there, Mr. Toews. Your heart had to be pumping when you saw that play happen.
No, it's the reason we see the victory formation and quarterbacks taking that secure knee at the end of games so much now. And that's such an iconic play. So we appreciate you guys reliving that for us today. Now, John, a couple years after that, you both just referenced it. It kind of catapulted the franchise towards that Super Bowl trajectory. John, what was that like for you as a player? We just heard from Coach on his Super Bowl victory in St. Louis. Super Bowl 15, New Orleans, I believe it was. You're reunited with your old coach from UCLA. I mean, what was that Super Bowl experience like for you as a player in Super Bowl 15?
Well, it's interesting because I start with the team itself, the players. And in most of the teams, a Dick Vermeil team, it's a really he's only going to keep players that really are going to commit and dedicate themselves to winning. And as he always says, you got to be smarter, stronger, tougher, and in better condition. And if you're not going to commit to that, then you're just not going to be able to make that team. And so some of the players that coach had cut and or had traded were pretty doggone good players talent-wise, but not sure if they really had the commitment to really putting forth the effort to win. And so I think what was remarkable about that team is that, and I may be wrong on this, but I believe that team that went to the Super Bowl had more free agents on it than any team that ever played in a Super Bowl. There were a lot of free agents on that team that came in that, that had the commitment and the character that coach was looking for. And I think that's a real tribute to coach, because to this day, he is beloved by his players, and he stays in touch with so many of them. And to be able to have to play on a team where you're competing next to a guy, you're competing with a guy that's on your team, where that individual stands. That they're going to give 100%, and that just makes you want to perform. And so I think that team, when you look at the pure athleticism of that team, we probably overachieved. A lot of, but just a bunch of great guys and that were totally committed. And we didn't get it done, but I guarantee if you watch that film, there were some players that were key players that didn't have their best game, no doubt about it. But if you were looking, we didn't get out tough, I'll tell you that. They carried more guys off the field on the Raiders side than they did on the Eagles side. They had some big plays that just took it to us. They had big scores, but if you're looking at that, you eliminate about 4 or 5 of those plays. The game was a lot closer than the score indicated. But that's not an excuse. They beat us, and they won and deserved to win. But it was an interesting team to play for, and I had just nothing but respect for that coaching staff and all those players.
Thanks, John. I want to shift for a moment. We got a few more questions, and then we'll get to some fan questions from YouTube and Facebook. So if you're out there viewing, please continue to keep the questions coming. We see them, and looking forward to asking Coach and John these coming up. Guys, I want to shift for a moment and start talking a little bit more about your personal lives and some things you've gone through. But Coach, I want to start with you. Winning Coach of the Year honors at 4 different levels. I know it takes a team, and you've already so humbly identified some of those key coaches throughout your career that you've shared the sidelines with that have helped these victories and these big moments that we've talked about. When you reflect back on your career, what leadership principles do you carry across that journey to get you to be that successful at so many levels? You spoke into groups, you're a motivational speaker, you got some great principles that you toss out there. I mean, speak to the college kid that's viewing in right now, the high school student, the younger buck. I mean, what are some of those leadership principles you drew through your entire career that you look back on today and are proud of?
Well, I think it starts with a philosophy. I really, early in my career, and I learned it early in high school coaching, that players win games, not coaches. Now, coaches help them win, but if you don't have good players, you're not going to win football games. So you've got to do a great job with your players. And John Wooden told me this. He says, don't worry about the opponent. Just make sure that you help your players be the best they can possibly be, and things will take care of itself. And it's so true. But, I always, I really enjoyed my players, and we had an expression, players don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And no matter how hard you're working them, if they know you really care about them and you're working them so they can succeed, not just improve your own coaching record, and so they can end up being the best they can be and share some wonderful experiences, they buy in, and then they start trusting you. And when they trust you, even though they're bitch and moan, they will work. And when their own work ethic is started being evaluated by themselves and they see the benefits within their own performance and their careers because of the effort they're making, they buy in more and more. And I have the expression, hard work is not a form of punishment. It's a solution. There's absolutely no correlation between getting better and working less. And I just learned, there were times I think I worked them too hard. I should have backed off toward the end of the season. As I look now and I look back in my career and evaluate things I would do a little differently. But see, today you can't coach like we coached. Today it's all controlled differently by the players' union, and that's not bad. Everybody's doing it. It's the same for everybody. But in the old days, you could outwork somebody. There was no limit on the number of players you could bring to the training camp. There was no limit on how many hours you could be on the practice field. There was no limit to how many double days you could have. There was no limit to how many padded full contact practices you could have. But see, now that's all controlled, and maybe for the best. But it's a lot harder to develop the average kid or the kid that's got talent but didn't know he had as much talent as he really had because he'd never worked hard enough to develop these skills. So, I think the big thing is, philosophically is if players know you care, they trust you. You build relationships with them. You teach them what work is all about. You share the highs, you share the lows, and you actually sometimes grow more in the losses than you do gain when you win. And when you're pulling people together and you help shape their future, And I've been a big believer in that, and I've had a lot of time in retirement to think about it and go back and write about it and talk to other people about it. But there is a definite camaraderie that exists on our football team, not just mine, John Sciarra's team, because John made as big a contribution to it as anybody else on our football team. But our teams cared about each other. Even in the national, even my St. Louis Ram team, when John said free agents, people think free agents, but that's when you go out and pay a lot of money. Our free agents were kids that weren't signed out of college or cut from other teams. Today, a free agent is someone who gets $25 million to sign his contract and goes and play. There are very few just undrafted college free agents playing anymore. But our team had a number of them that played extremely well. Well, I had 4 or 5 of them on the Eagles team. Kurt Warner was a free agent. London Fletcher was a free agent. DeMarco Farr was a free agent. Our offensive center was a free agent. Our left guard was a free agent. We had a lot of them. But bring them together to form a bond. You can develop a very, very strong team, regardless of what era, regardless of what level you're working in or playing in or coaching in.
Thanks, Coach. And John, you've identified Coach a couple times in today's session already as one of your role models. A few years back, you got to be UCLA's commencement speaker, which is a huge, huge honor at any university. And it's a testament to your career as a student athlete, a professional, a business professional, a family man. Looking back on that day as a commencement speaker, what was that experience like for you? What did it mean to you? And when you reflect back on getting to do opportunities like that, who are some of the biggest role models in your life other than Coach Vermeil, who's with us today?
Well, my parents, I was just really blessed with great parents, and I just was. So they were great role models, and I had in addition to Coach, I had another individual that was my boss when I started at Dun & Bradstreet back in the 80s, and so it's all about the people. I mean, if you find the right people, or if you're able to work and be have the experience of working with real leaders and people that you respect, then you're fortunate, because it doesn't always work that way. There's people that I know that from a principle perspective, a moral perspective, that maybe I disagree with. It's not as fun than working with somebody who really you believe is a true leader. As far as the commencement speech, I'll tell you. I mean, I even opened up the speech saying that I returning a punt in a Super Bowl doesn't compare to how nervous I am right now standing up there in front of 7,000 people on Jan Steps. I mean, it's just it was quite breathtaking and nerve-wracking to be quite frank. But I just tried to relate my life experiences to that class, and basically say that with my degree, this was kind of the path I went down. And it's interesting because I was a sociology major, and I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, well, what are you going to do with a sociology degree? It's really about learning about people and, and understanding different social situations. And when, if you don't have good sales technique, if you're selling, knowing people, empathy is big. I mean, and I talked about that. And so I think, it was pretty, number one, I was totally flattered when I was asked to be the speaker, but it was pretty intimidating, I have to admit. But just sharing my experiences at UCLA and the path that I went down, and hopefully, it meant something to them, and it was helpful to them. Troy Aikman was at that commencement day. He graduated that day and was actually in attendance. He went back to school, got his degree. And he had always said that, I want to walk. I want to be able to go up and get my, my diploma and my certificate of graduation. And he was there. And so that was kind of interesting. And I talked a little bit about that during the speech as well. And so I enjoyed it. We asked about other role models. I always come back to my parents and Coach, of course, and Jack Lyon, who was my mentor in business. But no, I loved it. I met Michelle there. I mean, UCLA is, I bleed blue and gold, and always will.
John, they always say, John's dad was as tough as I was. Okay, they're tougher.
You were nothing compared to him, Coach.
Oh,
you were on training wheels. I mean, as tough as you were, he was tough.
Old-fashioned dads raise their kids a little different. My dad raised me different than I raised my own, and then my kids raised theirs, my grandchildren. And John, I'm sure it's the same. His dad was a man's man. There was no way to misunderstand Mr. Sciarra, okay? There was no shades of gray or anything. It's white or it's black, it's right or it's wrong. And he produces probably one of the most complete student athletes in the history of UCLA. John graduated cum laude, scholar athlete. He's in the College Hall of Fame. He's in UCLA's Hall of Fame. And he's done extremely great in the business world. Why? Because the foundation his dad and mom gave him initially, and then he bought into other concepts from other leaders that helped him go ahead and carry it on from there.
Thanks, John. Now, John, I want you to pull your prop out there because you and I talked. Ryan, if we could get the three shot here. So, the coach, this is for you. So, you retired from the sidelines, but you really didn't retire. You've been running harder than ever. And, you got this Vermeil Wines label going on up there in Calistoga, which is your old stomping grounds as a boy. I got a bottle of the 34 here, which is aptly named after your Super Bowl victory with the Rams. Talk to us a little bit about owning a wine label, the process, and tell our fans where they can get it too, because it's some pretty darn good wine.
First off, I'm only a partner in it. I have 4 partners in it. Carl Peterson's a partner, and then 2 other friends with real money. That what turned my hobby of making Cabernet into a full-fledged business. I grew up in the Napa Valley. I grew up helping my grandfather Vermeil make our family wine. We didn't have a label on the bottle. It was all homemade. I helped, and the grapes came from the Freddie Annie vineyard, which they still do today. And we did that. We actually started making wine in 1999, 150 to 200 cases as a hobby. I had no money involved, no partners involved in it. It was just a friend was doing it and selling it his Cabernet from his little winery. 2008, friends came to me with real money and said they'd like to lose some. Let's go in the wine business. So we start making 2,500 cases of wine a year now, and our winemaker now is Thomas Rivers Brown, who's the Tom Brady of the winemaking business in the Napa Valley, really as good as they get with Andy Jones. Those 2 guys do a great job, and our wines get anywhere from 90 to 96. Highest grade we got was last year a 96 grade. We make 3 cabs. We make a Zinfandel. We make that blend, your 34. We make a Sauvignon Blanc, and we make a Chardonnay with the grapes coming from Sonoma County, Dutton Ranch. But you can just Google Vermeil Wines. Our history's there. We have a tasting room in Napa that is closed right now, killing us. We have a wine club of about 375 club members. I have 105 club members here in Philadelphia that get a shipment of based on their order 3 times a year. And, I thought the NFL was tough with only 32 teams. Well, Napa Valley has over 500 wineries. Talk about competition. But anyway, we haven't made the playoffs yet, but we are making very good wine.
Thanks, Coach. If you haven't had a chance, please taste it, you guys. It's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. All right, we're going to get to some fan questions. You guys have a few minutes for us to answer some fan questions here?
Sure do.
Sure.
All right, first one's for John. This one's off of from a fan on YouTube, watching on YouTube right now. They want to know, John, was it difficult making the change from the wishbone offense under Pepper Rogers to the veer offense with Coach Vermeil while at UCLA?
No, it wasn't difficult at all. And, because it's both options. The footwork is a little bit different because you have a drop step on the wishbone and kind of a jump step on the veer. So it's a little bit different mechanically coming away from center, but you still got to run the option. So once again, I kind of applaud Coach for that. He came from more of a pro style offense, and he wasn't going to can the option game. And what he did is he opened it up with the veer. And we had at one time toward the end, we had 4 different options on one play. Either you hand it off, you keep it, you pitch it, or you throw it. And as Coach and I were talking there, he told me, he said, I think you were just born too early. If you would have waited, you would have probably played quarterback in the NFL with these RPOs, run pass options. So it wasn't difficult at all. And as a matter of fact, I liked it a lot more because I got to throw the ball.
I actually bruised John a little bit when I brought him back here with us. Actually, he came through us through Tampa Bay. John McKay, right, Johnny?
That's exactly right.
John McKay, good friend. He knew I wanted John. He got rights to him, and then I gave, I think, a 4th-round draft pick or something to bring John.
You traded Mike Barilla. I think you had.
Oh, that was it. Okay, traded Mike Barilla, starting quarterback for John. And anyway, the veer allowed me to incorporate some of the NFL passing game a little bit, and keep John with his skills. And Terry Donahue and those coaches had been coaching the wishbone. They really taught me the option football, and then we put a package together, and it became a very, very fine offense by the end of that year. But we were humming.
Yeah.
Coach, this is from Facebook. One of the fans out there, caught in the beginning that you're living comfortably and safely out there with your family in Eastern Pennsylvania. So it must have stuck to you a little bit when you were with the Eagles. The fan wants to know on Facebook, how many of your Eagles players and your NFL players do you still keep in touch with? I mean, the Rolodex in your phone must be pretty great considering the relationship that you and John have, and it's pretty evident that you have a great relationship with a lot of your former players.
Well, I think there's 16 of them that live in town off that Super Bowl that still live here. We get together, and John knows I have a charity tournament going on our 28th year, which was canceled this year, for Chester County Boy Scouts, and it's become a reunion. But the problem is a lot of them can't play because, again, they're a celebrity, but they can't play golf because they got so many other banged up injuries, or knees, hips, shoulders, that playing in the league as long as they did. But there's a lot of them living here, and I stay in touch. Jerry Sizemore's in Texas. I stay in touch with Jerry. Bill Bradley, I only coached 1 year, his last year, but he's in Texas. I see these guys. I talk to these guys. And like I say, a lot of them come to the golf tournament. It's become a reunion, and the party the night before is a lot of fun.
John, this one comes into us from one of our YouTube viewers. UCLA has played at the Rose Bowl as their home field since 1982. When you guys went back to the Rose Bowl game in '76, you weren't quite there yet in terms of playing all your home games there. And we've been so grateful to have UCLA as a partner and allowing them to call the Rose Bowl the home field of UCLA Bruins football since '82. It's exciting for us, and we're excited to get back to college football here once everything clears up safely and with a social distance reminder for everyone. John, you got to go back and be honorary captain a couple of seasons ago, either last season or the prior season. What can you take us into what that's like when you're an honorary captain? What did you say to the team in the locker room or when you interacted with them before that game?
Well, one of the things I noticed is when I was walking, when I was standing on the sideline before I was walking out, I actually thought I was standing in a hole, because the guys were like about a foot taller than I was. Of course, they had cleats on and a helmet, but in any event, no, it's very exciting, and once again flattering to be able to to be asked to be the honorary captain. I know Coach has been the honorary captain as well, and actually I have to brag a little bit here. I've been the honorary captain for 2 of the USC games at the Rose Bowl, and we won both of those games. So I'm not saying I'm good luck, but you have to kind of give me credit for that. I'm taking full credit for those wins. And but no, it's very flattering, and it's a real honor to be able to be the honorary captain. So I get very excited about that.
Well, UCLA hosts USC at home this year when we get back to football. So you keep your cell phone handy, John. I think they might be giving you a call with that plug there. That's a good reminder. You're 2-0 the last 2 home games there. This next question comes in. We got a couple more here, you guys, and then we'll call it a day for Rose Bowl Live episode 2. This next one comes in from YouTube, and they want to go back to both of you guys, and they want to talk a little bit about the movie Invincible. And Coach, you're portrayed in that. It's a great movie with Mark Wahlberg and Kinnear, and it's a really cool peek at the Eagles franchise back in that time, really centering around Wahlberg's character of Vince Papale. Can you guys both, and maybe start with you, John, characterize Vince Papale, the person, in real life? We know there's some cinemagic to these movies whenever we see them with Rudy and Invincible, and we know that and understand that, but Vince was a real guy, and what was he like being a teammate of and Coach, what was it like to coach a guy like Vince and be represented in a movie like that? John?
Well, I met Vince in '78. That whole movie was based on 1976. So that's when Coach had that open tryout. And of course, Coach is much more informed and credible in talking about this because there was a character of Coach Vermeil in the movie. So, but Vince was there. I met Vince in '78 and played with him a year. And then I think the 4th year, what would have been his 4th year, I think he was released, and then I think he came back with some injuries. I think Coach brought him back, but Coach can probably talk and speak more to that. But Vince, I have to say, he was just not only was he a fierce competitor, not really blessed with a lot of athleticism, but I'll tell you, he had good speed, he had good hands, he was tougher than nails, and he worked as hard as anybody on the team, and probably harder than most, and a good guy, and just a really solid guy. And so there's nothing not to like about Vince. He was just a really great teammate, a good man. And, obviously, if you could make a team by walking on, and as I watched that movie, and once again, Coach will speak more to it, but when I watched it, they may have embellished 10% of that. You would not have a Sandlot football game with car lights on a field in the rain when you're in training camp. You just would not do that. Because when you're in a Dick Vermeil training camp, what you look for when practice is over is a bed. That's what you look for. You want to get your legs up, and you just want to fall asleep with a boatload of ice. And you won't be out there competing and playing with friends in a pickup game. That's the only thing I saw that probably did not happen. But Vince is a great guy. Great guy.
I see Vince often. Okay, I see Vince often. His son, Vince Jr., just signed with the Montreal Canadian Football League team. I think he can play. I think he's a slot receiver. He could have played on any team I coached, but we haven't been able to get him a tryout, a real solid with an NFL team, so he went to Montreal. But anyway, I read the script before the movie was in production, and I called the guy and I said, there's a lot of stuff in this script that is not true. And the guy said to me, Coach, we're not doing a documentary, we're telling a story. They told the story. There's things that are exaggerated and things that are not quite right, but the story is true.
That's
true. And Vince didn't make any money on the movie. He's made a lot of money as a speaker. He's a very fine speaker. He's still traveling, doing speaking engagements based on that story and movie.
Coach, talk about the tryouts that season. Is that a true point of the story? No coach in their right mind would do a tryout like that in today's NFL. But mean, you certainly were looking to build a culture there and change the mindset a little bit when you got to town, it seemed like.
Well, there's rules against all that stuff today. You can't do that today. But really, it was just, hey, we didn't have a first, second, or third round draft choice that year, or the second year, or the third year. So I figured we'll just get some bodies. I'd like a lot of people to compete against, and every once in a while you find somebody. So we had the open tryout, and it was a kick, But Vince was glaringly the best athlete. He didn't play college football. The St. Joe, he was a track man. They didn't have a football team. He played a little semi-pro with a team here in for Philadelphia Bell, I think they called it. But anyway, he did a great job. He still does a great job. He's a great dad. His daughter works for the 76ers basketball team, and he's part of the culture here in Philadelphia, really, because of that movie.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I would say,
Go ahead,
I would say and I'm very glad that Coach cleared this up on free agency, because today most people look at free agents as guys that are on the market and up for grabs that are superstars.
Yeah.
40 years ago, if you were a free agent, you were kind of the guy that nobody really wanted. You were available. You were available to play. And so when I said that about free agents and that Super Bowl team having a number of free agents and maybe more free agents of that type, not today's type, is really, and I'm glad Coach cleared that up, because, if I were just watching football over the last 5-6 years, I would think that free agents were the best players, and it was back then. It was a total opposite.
All right, last question, you guys, and this is kind of a fun one. This is from one of our Facebook listeners, and it's in regards to superstitions. They want to know if you have any, back when you were coaching and playing, did you have any superstitions that you followed before the game, after the game? My new superstition is I'm going to have Vermeil wine anytime I have Rose Bowl Live with John Sciarra and Dick Vermeil. So I'm going to start that superstition today after the show. But, take us back. I mean, maybe you weren't that type of athlete or coach, but
I don't know if I had superstition. I had a ritual. I always found my wife to make sure I gave her away. Hey, I'm ready. We're gonna play. Hey, we started going together. We were 15 years old in high school, so she saw me play high school football, junior college football. Then we're married and raising our families, and she was at all the games. She'd travel with the team, so I always would look to see if she's seated properly and give a wave and that to get my mind straight and go from there. But no superstition that I can really think of other than that little ritual.
How about you, John?
Yeah, no, the same. I didn't have any superstitions at all, but I did have routines, and I had to be here or there. I was going to do this at this time. I was going to do this at that time, and so I had the same routine every game day. And what I ate for breakfast, what time I got in the locker room, going over game plan, stretching inside. Maybe a little bit of light lifting before. So it was just a routine that I had, very similar to Coach's, rituals, and so no superstitions.
All right, guys, it's been great. We really appreciate you spending the last hour with us, Coach. We know it's a little later back there on the East Coast. John, thank you. We're thankful you're safe, happy, healthy. For the listeners out there, thank you for coming in with us on Rose Bowl Live for a second straight week. We're back with you next Saturday, 4 o'clock Pacific time. We have another UCLA Bruin in the house, and Ann Myers-Drysdale, and she'll be joined by Lauren Gibbs, who's a silver medalist Olympic bobsledder from Pasadena. The week following that, on May 16th, we're going to welcome in 2 members of the 99 women's national team, USA, Brandy Chastain and Julie Foudy. So we really appreciate all you do for us at the Rose Bowl, for following us, clicking, commenting, supporting us. We said last week in episode 1, the Rose Bowl Stadium would not be what it is today and what it will be in the future without our community and our family members. And John, Coach, we appreciate it. You're such a valuable part of the Rose Bowl Stadium family, the UCLA family, and beyond. And we appreciate you joining us today, and hope you have a great rest of your weekend ahead.
All right. Go Chip Kelly and the Bruins.
There you go. Thanks, Dedan. It's my pleasure. Our pleasure.
All right. Love you, John. Take care.
You too, Coach.
You are looking live. There's something sacred about this stadium and its setting. There's nothing like this venue, in my opinion, in all of sports.
The setting is about as good as anywhere in the country. With the San Gabriel Mountains in the backdrop, it's always picturesque.
We're going to play football. Yes, he's going for the corner. He's got it. Vince Young scores.